So definitely a mistake that you want to avoid when you're here in Ukraine is confusing this country with Russia. So you just saw there a clip from my previous Tip Thursday about Ukrainian etiquette. And I don't think nowadays, I shot that video probably about 2 years ago, that so many visitors to Ukraine actually confuse Ukraine with Russia. I think that's become super clear, but there's still a lot of things that you're going to need to know about Ukrainian culture that are different to your own as a Westerner before you come here to Ukraine, not just for a visit, but to spend say 3 to 12 months per year, like basically to relocate part of the year here. So on this very, very cold Odessa evening, it is minus 12 Celsius. Hayekele. So the first big cultural difference that you're going to have to get used to when you arrive in Ukraine is the massive difference in the dating culture. Now, the upside to that is your dating options compared to back home, basically no matter where you're coming from in the world almost, they're going to be significantly better here in terms of, well, there's just a lot more beautiful women, first of all, and depending on who you are, probably you're going to gel with them maybe a little bit better in terms of values. At least that's what most guys say who come here or are interested in spending a lot of time in Ukraine. Now, of course, the massive downside in terms of dating culture I've gone into in a complete plethora of videos on this channel, the phenomenon of scammers, scammer girls. Here, Scammer Central, Odessa Mama, it is full of them, and they're going to be looking for you, the foreign guy who comes, who maybe isn't as au fait with the local dating culture, hasn't maybe gone through enough of the trauma of being scammed to figure it out yet. You're going to be a prime target for them. But on top of that, obviously you have differences in terms of expectations in gender roles that I've gone into in the other videos, and also on my online programs. And I think the real key, what I see in terms of guys who succeed with the local dating culture, and those who don't, at least those who, well, shall we say, reach their potential in terms of expanding their dating options and developing real long-term relationships here, or even if they're not interested, just lots of quick ones, is two things. First of all, they develop a real man mindset. Now, you probably heard Russian or Russian speakers speaking about a real man. It's a big compliment for a Russian guy to call you a real man. He's paying you a huge compliment if he calls you that, and that's basically the fact that they are very assertive, they tend to lead, they tend to be very dominant, a lot more than you're going to see in modern dating culture in the West, for sure. They could come off as a little bit uncouth or inconsiderate in Western dating culture, but here that's exactly the expectation that's made of men in the culture. And on top of that, you need to develop Slavic mentality intelligence, SMI as I call it. That's basically understanding not just how you have to behave, but also how the women behave here, what their expectations are, what is good behavior, what is not good behavior. And those two elements are more than 50% of it. So the second big cultural difference that you're going to notice if you come here to spend a lot of time, and even if you just spend a short amount of time, is if you are one of those people who relies on speaking English exclusively.
Что сегодня мы сделали? Что у тебя было?
Сегодня.
Да? На каком языке?
На английском.
Как было?
Ужасно.
Now, if you come here just as a tourist, it's not a big deal, in the sense that, of course, you can go to all the touristic centers like here in Odessa, or you can be in Lviv, the west of Ukraine, or in Kiev, the capital. And as long as you're in some kind of, I guess, restaurant or bar or somewhere in the center or museum, whatever, they will be able to accommodate the fact that you don't speak Ukrainian or Russian, and you can do everything in English. That's not a huge problem. But if you plan to spend more time here, not just touristic time, then it's going to become a bigger and bigger necessity for you to at least be able to speak some Russian. And I know Ukrainian is the national language, but in reality, cities like Odessa, they use Russian in everyday life. And still, to a certain extent, Kiev, the earlier you get started, the more of a return you're going to get in that investment, and you will struggle to do the things you want to do if you rely completely on English yourself. So either you're going to have to get an interpreter to do a lot of the stuff for you, or you can learn the language yourself. So that's one of the big cultural differences, I think, that, you know, it's easy to just rely on English, especially if you're the stereotypical American or Brit, because it is the global lingua franca, but it is not realistic to do that for a lot of things here in Ukraine. So the next big culture difference I want to point out, and this is going to definitely affect people who come, say, from Northern Europe, I think, more than the rest of the West, and that is the complete disrespect for rules here in Ukraine in general. If you come from a country where people are real stickler for rules, maybe also United Kingdom to a certain extent, that it's going to be a massive cultural difference here in Ukraine, because it reminds me of Ireland maybe 20 or 30 years ago. People have at times a healthy disrespect for authority and rule of law. At other times it's obviously a major problem for getting things done, that people just don't respect rules in general, don't respect the laws. There's a lot of corruption. So definitely be prepared for that if you're doing business here, if you're doing anything with the government, or if you're just dealing with other normal people here in Ukraine. Ukrainians not the biggest on following rules. So the next thing that's a big cultural difference nowadays between Ukraine and most Western countries is the PC culture in the West that has not arrived here by and large to Eastern Europe in general, and definitely not to Ukraine. So let me explain how this might be a big cultural difference. It may even shock you a little bit. So using racial epithets, playing on stereotypes of different racial groups is pretty common here. It's not always nefarious. Sometimes it's just a little bit of good-hearted fun. Other times it, of course, reveals a deep-rooted prejudice against certain groups. So on the upside about that, you don't have to be overly concerned about political correctness here. And for a lot of guys coming from the West, that's a breath of fresh air, that people aren't just overly sensitive about the terms that people use, and you can have a joke and it's not going to be taken the wrong way probably. But at the same time then, overt racism is a lot more tolerated here. So it's kind of a double-edged sword in that sense. Some of it is good, not being oversensitive about these things. Then on the other hand, there is more overt discrimination or prejudice. So you're definitely going to have to get used to it in any case when you come here. So that's basically something to think about in terms of the cultural difference between here and the West. So as a final point about the cultural differences to expect here in Ukraine, just like to draw your attention to the fact that this country has big differences in terms of the climate. First of all, we're just cleaning up here the Christmas decorations by Odessa Town Hall. And you can see there's a little bit of snow behind. Now, snow is not actually that common here in the south of Ukraine. It's actually really warm in the summer. And on top of that, you just have different little subcultures in terms of maybe ethnicities in the country. Like here to Odessa, there's if you go to Buchak, I have a vlog about that. There's actually a lot of Bulgarians, Gagauz, Roma, Moldovans or Romanians living there, as well as, we'll say, Ukrainians, and obviously a lot of people who feel partly Russian throughout the country as well. The culture in the West in Lviv is dramatically different to here in Odessa. The mix of people, where they come from, and the kind of subculture that's grown up around the city. This is a big port city. Obviously, people spend the summer by the seaside at the beach. You can't do that in Lviv in the West. It's more an old world historic city, very, very beautiful. And the local culture is more coffee drinking culture, for example. So you have this just as you go around the country, and that is super cool about Ukraine, that you have those differences. It doesn't mean it's a huge difference. It's not, obviously it's one country, but you do have these little subcultures. You have the mountains in the west with the Hutzol, went up there to Carpathians, what amazing. For example, you can go hiking, skiing. So you can basically do most things. It's very different to, say, neighboring Belarus, where you don't have those huge differences in topography, climate, and maybe the mixture of peoples as much. Makes Ukraine, I think, a lot more interesting, and just be aware that it's not monolithic in terms of culture either here. So there you go. There were the 5 things that you need to know about Ukrainian culture before you move here for an extended stay. So at least 3 months, 3 to 12 months per year. And if you are interested in learning a lot more than just about the basic differences in the culture, I have my high-level consultation group. It's going to be 10 high-level guys who get together online. We have 7 live streams and we discuss the major issues for Western guys when they move here in terms of things like real estate, whether you want to buy your Black Sea villa and use it during the summer, not here in the freezing cold of winter. It could be a Kiev penthouse, or you're interested in knowing how to come here and spend more than the 3 months visa-free that most of us avail of, and actually get a residency permit, maybe temporary permit, maybe even eventually get Ukrainian citizenship. There is just some of the things that we go into, along with other things like business opportunities, how to build a network here of friends, also business contacts in Ukraine, so you get to take the most of the opportunities that a move to Ukraine will afford to you. Basically, so that you can 5x your lifestyle by spending 3 to 12 months here. That I'm going to relaunch. It's actually going to start at the beginning of March, and they're going to open up for enrollment very, very soon. And the way to find out about that is to be on my free mailing list. So if you're not on that, then it's a no-brainer. Go down below, click on the link, and basically you get a free gift, which is my favorite secret places here to meet beautiful women in cities like Odessa, Kiev, and Minsk in Belarus. If you're also thinking of a trip to Minsk, will be useful to get that info. So down below, that's a free gift. You basically just confirm your email after you type it in, and then you're on the mailing list. And then in due course, you will get the opportunity to join the relaunch season 2 of Slavic Utopia Secrets Ukraine, coming very soon. The sun is about to disappear over that horizon, and it is absolutely freezing here. It's -12 Celsius, as I said, so I'm going to get in off the balcony here and warm up a little bit. See you very soon in the next video. Do побачення, до свидания from a chilly but beautiful Odessa mama.
SAR Experience.